Welcome to the Agriscaping podcast. This is Justin Roner coming at you, and got a great guest with me here today. He's been a friend of mine for many years, and we share a common challenge, but he has found a way to turn that challenge into quite a blessing for everybody. And his name is Nick Klein. He is the owner of Hostile Hair. Say hello, Nick.
Hello, Justin. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, you're welcome. And the challenge we both share that he's made a profit out of and really turned into something of a blessing for all of us, I think, is, living in Arizona, I grow a lot of food in my front yard. And every morning I come out and there's those wild rabbits that have infiltrated my front yard and they are eating my food. But we've found ways to manage those. We've talked about it many times in some of the other old podcasts and in my master classes and stuff like that. And we talk about how we try to mitigate against them. But what I love that Nick's done, and he's taught me to do as well, is how to actually bring that whole rabbit world, that nature world, into the cultivation of my own food production here and greatly improve my food production, the quality of my produce. And what do you call it, Nick?
Well, I would call it livestock integration, or a phrase that we coined is hair-oponics.
Hair-oponics, love it.
So, the wild rabbits that come in and munch on your carrot tops and do what they do, they're survivalists. They see a nice, luscious yard they want to eat. And so I get it. They're not exactly a welcome guest. But, you put a set of cages in the backyard and welcome them on in, and now all of a sudden they're part of the family.
Right. They're going to get names. And and for my kids' sake, they hope that their names aren't lunch, dinner, breakfast, rabbit chops, lamb quarter, or whatever. They want them to stay fluffy and buzz and spaz, or they want those fluffy. They want them to keep those cute names so they don't turn into a meal later, right?
Well, that's always an option, but, and it's funny because I actually raise rabbits for that purpose, for eating them. And I'm the self-proclaimed mass murderer of the cute and fluffy, which is a total sell to certain demographics, of course. That being said, I want them to be as healthy and happy and comfortable with, in their time with me as possible. And so I keep that in mind. Part of the reason I got into it in the first place was because I didn't like the way that our food is being handled, and especially our livestock. And this gives me the control that I know exactly how my food is handled, from what it eats to how it's cared for to even the swiftness and humaneness of its death. It's how humane the death can be.
Well, on that subject right now, I know it's an uncomfortable one for a lot of people too. It's sometimes they forget where their food comes from, or the fact that even our greens often are built off of a foundation of animal manures and stuff like that. I mean, to build the biomass, to build the soil, without the animal life, it's tough to replicate a good soil system to even grow good food without having that component actually even brought into the mix.
Exactly.
And on that note too, I mean, it's a tough conversation, but it's kind of the reality of things. I mean, I grew up with a dairy farm in the family, so our freezers were always stocked full of meat. We had goats there and goat meat and all that stuff too, and we had the chickens and the eggs and as it pertains to my own health and recovery, when I need a detox, I become vegan, flat out. I become a vegan, and I need that when I need a detox, and I've got too much stress in my life, and I'm allergic to everything. I basically become a vegan, and because it's easier on my body during those times when I'm sick, but I'm not sick all the time, and I don't have access to food all the time, especially if I'm up in the mountains and things like that. I don't have access to good forageable stuff, especially the winter time. And people that live in cold country, they know that there's a natural process to the majority of humanity on planet Earth that have to go through cycles, and that meat and jerky, I mean, the pioneers, it's like, there was a correlation between a great symbiotic relationship between the animals and the people, and that's how humanity has gone, for eons. And it's So it's a tough subject, but at the same time, one way that I guess me and my kids have talked about even that side of it, we're going to transition a rabbit on into a food source for ourselves if that happens or when that happens. We look at it from another perspective. It's like if that rabbit died and we had to then take care of it and we had to just bury it, what real value did it have? What all that love we put into that animal and all that care that we had, the name and all that stuff is like, what do we have left to show for it? Once rigor mortis starts setting in, you can't eat that. It's going to have to be thrown away because in my HOA and in the area where I'm at, I can't bury a bunch of animals in my yard. It's actually against the law. And so when they've had us with our chickens and it's like we have to put it in a plastic bag or a double plastic bag and get away with throwing it away in our black can. It's really, really sad because then we know it's never going to break down and never turn into anything of value. All that love is now really going to waste. It's just a waste. It's a toxic mess is what it ended up.
Yep, and that's, I even spoke with a police officer that said, yeah, we would rather you not bury animals in the backyard. Please dispose of them in a garbage can because somebody 10 years from now that owns your house is going to find them and then call us. And then we have to investigate whether or not there was a serial killer living there.
Right. Yeah, it's no joke. Because over a couple years of a couple transitions of people, and then they end up digging up a pool, and all of a sudden they're finding bones. And I'm like, oh my goodness, was that a baby? I don't know what that was. We only found parts. Oh my goodness, they freak out. That's absolutely true. We've had that happen. We found horses, buried in people's yards, and yeah, it's sad. But the sadder part about it is the fact that there was so much love put into an animal, and now it's really gone to waste. And now it's just freaking people out.
Yeah, you've come full circle. But yeah, so I guess if your motive isn't to eat the animals, that's understandable. But rabbits can still serve an awesome purpose in producing, actually what I like to say, they're the converters of the non-edibles into edibles. And so let me walk you through a process if you let me indulge here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've found that I can use rabbits, quail, and fish in a system that will continuously produce nutrients, and the only time you're losing nutrition out of the system is when you're harvesting something out of it. So the idea is you have rabbits, and rabbits poop a lot. So that rabbit poop goes into a specialized composter where you grow black soldier fly larvae. And these black soldier fly larvae, they love rabbit manure and other scraps you give to them. And basically, at about 2 weeks old, they mature and they try to go to ground. Well, in the special composter, they go down and they hit plastic and go the path of least resistance, which happens to be an angle upward and into a harvester. So these little grubs march out of the compost and into the harvester that happens to be the trough in which you use to feed quail. And the quail happily dispose of the little grubs, and they're kind of messy eaters, and they bite and they tear and they drop the grubs into the fish tank below them. Now, you're getting quail eggs, so you can either incubate the quail to grow more quail, or you can harvest the eggs to replace chicken eggs. But all of that feed, all the feed that the quail wasted because they're messy eaters, drop down and feed fish below them. Now you can raise tilapia, bluegills, catfish, anything that's to your gusto, if you will. I stick with tilapia because they can handle our desert heat a little bit better, and I don't have to worry about getting too hot for them. But anyway, so the fish manure and the quail manure is now in the aquatic system of an aquaponic system. All of that water is dirty and needs to be filtered, so you run it through hydroponic beds, either a deep water culture or an ebb and flow system, anything that's got enough surface area to break down the solids into smaller not microbials. You have different bacteria that change the nitrites into nitrates,
Mm-hmm.
and then plants can absorb them. And so the plants essentially clean the water for the fish. And the fish are happy, the plants are happy, and everybody's happy there. Justin, you're a big time gardener. You've got lots of veggies and stuff growing.
Yep.
How much of a tomato plant can you eat?
Well, only the tomato. The rest of the plant is basically poisonous and not something I'm going to mess with.
Okay, it's a
So,
nightshade, right?
yeah, it's a nightshade. So by percentage of the plant, we're probably talking we're really only eating 10% of the plant, on a cycled basis, like that'll grow some more tomatoes off of that. The 10% of the plant that's actually growing the tomato, we'll eat off of that, and then it'll grow some more tomatoes at a different part of that same plant. But basically, about probably 10% of that plant is actually
Okay.
tomato.
Would you say that the same thing's true for like pepper plants and other fruiting or plants that give off a product and they have a lot of stem and a lot of other
Oh yeah,
vegetation on them?
peppers, eggplant,
Well,
squash, zucchini, watermelon. I mean, think about how much a watermelon grows.
oh yeah,
All that stuff.
they vine all over the place.
Yep.
Um, and even the rind of the watermelon we don't really eat. So if you have rabbits in your control, you can now turn all of that stuff that you normally don't eat into rabbit feed. And they've put it all back into the system and feed it back into the hairoponic system. That is livestock integration. So you've got rabbits, quail, and fish that are basically living together symbiotically, and then plants that kind of tie them all together. So that's my idea. I mean, I watch it happen in nature. We've got forests that the cycle of life exists everywhere. Well, this is a way to bring it into your own backyard and kind of control the results.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, with the aquaponics myself, it's like I use that a lot, and I just went over. If you want to check out what Nick's up to, you can go to hostilehair.com and be able to check out some of the things that he's up to, and a lot of different things going on there. And so he's trying to really build a new image for what the rabbits look like. He's got some pretty funny T-shirts and stuff. I mean, if you gotta be able to chuckle about it. I mean, in all reality, you gotta be able to chuckle about it, especially when you know the heart of Nick Klein. And just like he was talking about earlier, it's like he really loves rabbits, and if you want to find out how much he loves rabbits, just ask him how many rabbits he's raised in his lifetime. What do you think, Nick?
Oh man, I don't think I've got a number for that, but it is just barely this side of 100,000. I mean,
that's what I was thinking of. It's like you've had more rabbits in your world than I think my grandparents ever had. Cattle when they were doing their cattle farming and stuff. So it's a lot.
well, and this is my motivation behind. My dad, he owns 200 acres in southwest Wisconsin, and he has a beef herd. He's got 40 head of cows. And every year, those 40 give him, 40 to 45 babies. And they, when he's down there feeding them, he's filling the bunks up. They come up to him, he scratches their ears, and they're rubbing their head against him, and they trust him, and they are comfortable, and they are not stressed. And this is something that, he's not an organic farmer by any means, but he's at least sustainable. Everything that he produces on his farm is fed to his animals, and then he sells them every year. Well, I can't have Angus and Holsteins in my backyard on my postage stamp of a property in the metropolitan area of Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not socially acceptable to do that. So I went to rabbits and just applied the same principles. These rabbits are calm, they trust me, and they're taken care of, and they are stressless until the end. That's the goal.
Yeah, and so, well, even on that, I guess I think it'd be good to just look at some of the numbers. If you have some of the numbers on it's kind of product versus waste. I guess when you're talking about cattle, you obviously have got a very large animal. You got a lot of waste material, bone, and all that other stuff. I mean, when they're harvesting those animals as opposed to a rabbit. It's like, what is there a difference? Do you know what the difference is by chance? I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know about useful products versus overall weight. I mean, my friend that worked at Swift meatpacking plant, he said that their motto was, we harvest everything but the squeal, talking about hogs.
Yeah.
But so I know that all of the animal can be used on some level, but let's talk about the cost of production. You look at my dad, he was figuring up, and this was just kind of spitballing some numbers, he figured it costs him 9 times more feed and water and resources than per pound of animal than my rabbits do. So
wow.
Basically, rabbits are 9 times more efficient than cattle. And keep in mind, this isn't an exact science as far as how much is going in. That was just an average. I think he was drinking, and I wasn't really writing down the numbers at the time, so it could be slightly off. No judgment there. Anyway, he does a very efficient job of it, but it costs him a certain amount of feed, and it's much greater in a large animal than it is with a rabbit.
Mm-hmm. Especially since the rabbit has so many options. It can take a lot of different types of materials, just like you were talking about, that are typically waste within a garden space and turn it into something of a product. I mean, the first product you get from any rabbit is the same product I get from the rabbits that eat my yard in the front yard. They leave those little pelletized fertilizer, out the back end. They leave them behind.
That's what I call a time-release nitrogen pellet.
That is absolutely right, and we use those, and those are one of the only manures basically that I can use directly into my garden.
Yep.
From my area, because like chicken stuff, I can't use chicken stuff right away. That stuff burns everything.
No, I think the chickens, the fowl, they urinate and they poop out of the same hole. So you've got ammonia mixed with a lot of nitrites and a little bit of nitrate. So you have to compost that down. You have to let bacteria break down the ammonia and the nitrite into nitrates, and then it's a little bit more friendly for the garden. Mm-hmm. But that takes time. I've heard stories of people that have chicken coops that are on top of 3 or 4 feet of old chicken manure, and then somebody goes and scoops it out and throws it in their manure spreader and ruins 10 acres of prime planting ground because it's just way too hot.
Yeah.
It throws the pH way off. I think it raises the pH up to like 9 or something, depending on your consistency. But it definitely not as friendly as rabbits. You can use rabbit manure for soil fixing, or you can put it, like if you grind the manure into the soil, it's a nice neutral. On a pH scale, it's about a 7. The urine is a little bit more, not caustic, but it's more towards the base size. It's probably closer to an 8. But the manure mixed into the soil, you mix rabbit manure with some caliche clay and maybe some sand in there, and all of a sudden you can plant in what never would have taken a seed before. So anyway.
So on that note, I guess I'm curious on how do you separate the two? I mean, you're talking about you got the urine side and then you got the pellet side. How do you separate the two? I mean, do you separate the two and use them differently, or what do you typically do with that?
Well, in my cage systems, I try and keep the urine aquatic so that I don't have to smell it. As urine dries, you're going to really smell the ammonia. You're going to smell that stuff, and it's just nasty. So I try. The rabbits are pooping into basically a basin of water that auto flows out, and then there's a straining system that takes the manure off, and the urine stays aquatic. Well, I can take that urine and distill it down back to where it's about the same concentration as it comes out of the bunny, and then sell it for $1 an ounce to people that are trapping coyotes or other predator animals. So even the urine is a product, and yeah, that's a little bit gross. It's not a system everybody wants to get into, but.
But once you get outside of the city, you get 50 miles out of the city, and the things you're talking about are quite relevant and normal.
you say 50 miles outside of the city. I'm looking at the Facebook page for my subdivision this morning, and they were saying that there are coyotes that are 20 feet away from the school buses.
Yeah. Well, I guess they're 50 miles from Phoenix, right? You're about that, or is it only about 30 miles?
It's, let's see. I think I'm 25 miles from downtown Phoenix. So, and this is, I mean, we're getting to where it's starting to get built up enough out here, but these coyotes, they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care that there's people around. Nobody's taking a shot at them. They've never seen a rifle, so they're coming right into town, and all your little chihuahuas that go missing and stuff. I'm betting that the ones to blame are just on the outskirts.
That's cool.
Well, I got dark in a hurry.
Yeah. That. But it's the subject on the rabbit side. The different sides of it that you're able to even use and sell the urine. I mean, you're finding ways to monetize it, just like your dad does, just like your friend. Everything but the squeal. They're harvesting everything but the squeal. It's reality. It's people actually trying to make the most of what they've got. And I think respectfully, everyone tries to do that. And despite all the negative press and things like that, it's like if we focus on what we're for, we're always going to end up in a much better conversation with anybody. If you're for conservation, I think everyone's conservation minded when it comes down to it, as long as you don't go against them. If you start coming out against them, then they defend, and now you have a fight. But when we're having a conversation like about cute bunnies, and whether we call them a hostile hare or not, it's still, we're trying to do what's best for the bunny in the world, thanks to what the bunny can do. It's like we're looking at the benefits. We're looking at what's really good and what's useful, and what might be the best use of an animal as it transitions in life. Is it better to end up in a landfill? For all those people that get those Easter bunnies, right, and they want to raise their Easter bunny rabbits, and then eventually they get to too large, and what do then they try to pawn them off on Nick, and they say, hey, can you take 15 more rabbits, right? And you're like, for heaven's sakes, you didn't think this through.
So this is something that I do. I actually stopped selling rabbits the month before Easter. Not because if somebody wants a pet, that's one thing. I don't mind selling them a pet. I don't mind teaching them how to raise rabbits as pets, and they can have a rabbit for a pet. But people that are buying 10 of them to have an Easter party, and then they have no idea what they're going to do with them later, and they think, oh, well, I'll just turn them loose into the wild so they can be free. Congratulations, you just fed the local wildlife.
Yep. You can have more coyotes in your neighborhood now.
Yes, exactly. So I do run an ad after Easter saying that I will make sure that they go to a good home. I don't say in what form, but no, just kidding.
But
that's horrible.
I get it, but it's responsible management of livestock. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And for the most part, people are clueless on actually how livestock is managed, or that there's even a concept of it. They only get what they get from TV and other news, channels or documentaries that make them out to be villains. Yeah. Those that are trying to manage things. Now, granted, there are some very bad practices, just like motivated you to raise your own rabbits. Motivated me to raise my own fish. I don't know, fish no one probably cares about fish. Those crazy beady eyes, no one probably even cares about them. But anyway, the quail, the chickens, it's, we got guinea pigs. Go down to South America, and if you think guinea pigs are cute, well, just go walk down the streets of Peru on a weekend in the market area. You're going to find a whole lot of them that don't look cute anymore.
No, but they do look delicious.
Exactly. So it's, the world and all of its creatures have a purpose to fill, and a lot of them end up in the bellies of the other animals, and that's part of their purpose. And that is the best place for them when it really comes down to it. That's how nature built them. It's like that they transition not on their own. I mean, having a bunny rabbit or a chicken go all the way to the extent of their life is really a sad scenario for that animal, but also even a sadder scenario for what is produced out of that. It's like, unless people like maggots and want to increase the fly supply and pests and disease, which I don't think people do. That's the natural approach to taking care of rabbit stuff is, rabbits passing on and chickens passing on and all that stuff is literally it's maggots and flies. And that's about it.
That's when you look at. Well, here's one of my views. One of the things I've found is that we live in the land of instant gratification and zero accountability.
Yeah.
So we want that T-bone steak, but we want it wrapped in cellophane, grown on a tree, and picked by a legal immigrant. It doesn't come from a cow anymore. It comes from the grocery store.
Yeah, it doesn't come from Betsy. It doesn't come from old Betsy. And milk doesn't either, because apparently you can milk rice now. So it's
Yes, I saw they've got almond milk, and that's probably because the other name for it would be something we don't want to talk about. But yeah, you don't get milk from we'll say plants, well, except for milkweed. Anyway, my point is though, these people that aren't willing to do anything, they're 4 generations removed from the last farmer in their family.
Yeah.
And so their idea of where food comes from is a little bit skewed. So unless they're willing to pick up the pitchfork and start cleaning out stalls or, growing a garden and doing these things, they don't have a leg to stand on. Unless they're in food production, they can't complain about it.
So what's the kindest way to kind of think about all this stuff? I mean, that's really, I love to try to bring balance back into things for people and totally acknowledge that it's tough. It's tough to kill an animal, and for those of us that have done it, we don't feeling good isn't the way we would describe it. It's not that at all. It's a different relationship. I mean, how is it for you? I mean, I know for myself, having done things for survival and stuff like that for myself, and learning these skills and teaching my kids some skills, really survival tactics and stuff like that, it's not easy.
No, and the phrase that I've used is, we few that raise our own livestock do so because we care enough to tend them and take on that responsibility. It's not that we enjoy the kill. I don't enjoy killing rabbits. The first time I did it, I nearly quit.
Yeah.
Because it was, first off, the tactic I was taught was horrible. So I went and I did some anatomy research and figured out where in the rabbit I could activate, if you will, and harvest them with the least amount of stress possible. And I'm actually in the middle of making a device that will help me do that. But there are some things out there that will cause a cervical dislocation and basically scramble the nerve center before the rabbit even knows it's dying. So it's gone before it's even in pain. So
there's no conscious awareness to the passing. It's that quick.
Yeah, and by the time they figure out how much trouble they're in, they're gone. So
and even talking about it like this, I know just from my own experience, that some of our listeners are they're squirming in their seats right now, and it's tough to even contemplate it because, well, but it is a reality, and then there's we're probably turning a few people vegan right now, and but at the same time, and that's okay, if going vegan is your path in life to find health and healing, and you become a new rabbit sanctuary. You've found another way to process rabbits and wild rabbits and other things to have them be kindly adhered to. You're going to learn something, and it's that life's tough and people die, and we all ain't going to live forever, and neither do the animals.
Well, and I have a few friends that are vegan for health purposes. You talked about some of the things that you do when you get sick, but they're their blood type doesn't allow them to eat very much meat, and so they're essentially vegan. But they still have 2 Saint Bernards, and so dogs aren't meant to be vegan. And you know, one of the ways you can make sure that your pet food is cruelty-free is you raise it yourself. You know, you can't force your dog to be vegan. It will die. It needs the proteins derived from animals. So that's
well, and I know some people might argue with you on that, but I really have no experience, so I don't have any say on that. But I do know that yeah, it's just a big subject. It's just an interesting thing. But what I love that you're.
My opinion.
What's that?
There's just in the difference between plant-derived lipids versus animal-derived lipids. You know, the fluffy big cholesterol you get from an animal is much more healthy than the oily small lipids that get stuck in the crevice of veins. You know, you've got 2 different types of lipids, different types of cholesterol that, you know, one is probably one of the leading reasons why we're dying of heart disease early in America, and the other one is what we were meant to consume. But again, this is everybody's got their sources of research, and you know, depending on the researcher, there's going to be some skew. But dogs, especially.
Yeah, research is all based on the questions you ask, and so if you ask a different question, you're going to get a different result. And so it's hard to really compare one research to another because they're asking different questions.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it just depends on, I guess there's a lot of opinion mixed in with some research, but in my opinion, you know, you put a dog out in nature, he's probably not going to go harvest a corn stalk and roast it over an open fire.
Well, and that's the other thing too. You know, just from my observation, it's like veganism is a luxury. It's a luxury. It's a luxury lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that needs to reside in a space where there's constant accessibility to a broad base of, you know, literally hundreds of varieties of vegetables, fruits, all that, you know, all that life. And it's hard to find places where that actually exists in reality, that you can actually just go out and forage something and be able to remain in a vegan lifestyle. It's just very difficult. My buddy Jake Mace, the vegan athlete, his garden's awesome, but he can't just live off of his yard. He'll do it like 1 week at a time and just kind of show that and showcase that. But just living off of it for, like, if you tried living off of it for a year or two, he knows that he's got to go outside of his own yard to find sourcing. Even though he's got a yard full of food growing and a tortoise, you know, it's he can't get all that real balanced nutrient or at least he can't have a real happy life necessarily from just doing that and living off that forever. Because even here in Arizona, as temperate as our climate might be, we still have spikes in our temperature. And so we have certain times where certain things just won't grow. And it's tough. And so where do you go? Where you're going to have to supplement that from someplace else, someplace further away. And it's wintertime, especially, I mean, for my family that lives up in Utah or families that live in Oregon or in Montana and things like that, it's like when winter hits, you know, good luck finding fresh veg. You know, that fresh veg is coming from Mexico or it's coming from way south. And if trucking stopped, what are you going to end up eating? It's just a bunch of canned food stuff. And then once the canned food's gone, then what do you eat? You know, it's short supply. And anyway, meat often comes right back into people's diets that are not in a luxury environment. Simple as that. It's a very dense nutrient source that can last a really long time and heats and warms the body. That's another cool thing about it. What I've noticed, at least in the wintertime. It's like eating meat when I'm, you know, going snow camping with a bunch of scouts, like eating jerky. That is actually, it's almost vital to survival. You know, when you're building a big snow cave that you're going to go sleep in, you know, at night, it's like you kind of need that kind of stuff in you that helps move your metabolism to a really heated state in order to really stay warm. I agree.
And One other fun fact is, I think a pound of, what is it? A pound of broccoli actually has more protein in it than a pound of steak. I think if I remember right.
Wow.
But a pound of broccoli is almost a gallon and a half worth of volume. And so in order to get that much protein, you need to eat the volume of a milk jug and more to get it. And then if you've ever plowed through a container full of broccoli, there's some adverse effects to that on your digestive system. We won't go into that, but sometimes you get banished for being the broccoli guy. Anywho, there's
thing with that, because then you have to. I know vegans, they're not just eating 3 meals a day. It's more like 6 to 10 little meals, because volume-wise, you just can't process enough nutrients from the volume. I mean, you get a lot of fiber, so hey, everything's moving through you, great. But and again, it's kind of a luxury lifestyle from my observation of it, and it's hard to get it all from the raw sources to be able to make it work in a normal, 9 to 5 kind of working person's environment, who's living in an environment that can't grow veg, all the time.
Yep, it would be a full-time job to produce all the food needed to stay vegan on your own. I agree. And to be honest with you, to produce all the meat that you need, it would be almost a full-time job. Now, that being said, I actually, when I was in, I had my full setup going. I had 128 breeding females, 16 males, and was producing around 700 babies a month.
Wow.
And that's 3,500 pounds of rabbit going out the door. And I was doing about 20 minutes a day feeding and watering and cleaning cages. And then Saturdays were about 4 hours of working on different things. So I was able to maintain a day job and produce 3,500 pounds of live rabbit a month. I have since downsized a lot. In fact, in my own backyard now, I don't have anything, but there's about 400 rabbits in my control as far as other facilities go. But the average human being, let's say not average human being, let's say an adult male in the United States eats on average 270 pounds of meat annually. One breeding female rabbit will produce, if you're breeding her under optimal conditions 8 times a year, she'll produce 8 kits per kindle, or 8 babies per litter, and those will be harvested at 5 pounds apiece. That's 320 pounds live weight and just under 200 pounds dressed weight. So you're getting close to all the meat that you would actually consume in a year. And since rabbit meat is a higher percentage of protein, it requires less weight to get your minimal protein a day. And I think the survival rate protein is 75 grams a day. I'm not sure on that one, but 75 grams equals 45 pounds a year, and at 21% protein is what rabbits are. You're looking at needing 215 pounds of rabbit meat a year, and that's pretty much one breeding female will give you that. And you don't have to breed her 8 times a year. You can actually back off to 2 to 3 times a year, and just give her a friend next to her and produce the same amount without increasing a whole lot of cost. So just a thought there. I mean, 3 rabbits doing the job of 1 at full speed will actually give you rabbits that last a lot longer as far as productive time. So kind of went off on a tangent there, but once I start thinking numbers, I just spew them out.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's important, I think, to just kind of it's internalizing the actual process. I mean, it's recognizing that things happen and that there's an intention behind it. That you are really caring for it. It's not just happenstance. It's like rabbits don't just all of a sudden show up, and they don't just keep continuing to breed at will. You're not in this case. You're not putting them in a colony format, right? I mean, I've seen a number of people. We've got one of our certified agriscaping educators in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and he actually does colony style rabbitry. And but there's a lot of intention behind it. I know he has challenges with his system, and I know with your system it's very compact. People can do that 3-cage system that you've got pretty easy. That's what I have. And so we've got the 3 cages. We've got the three rabbits in there right now. We're not breeding them right now. They all have names, and so we're having a difficult time doing anything other than processing kale stub waste and roots. They're processing that for us and helping us build some new soil. But
that's awesome.
It just shows that for you as an individual, really care about the work that you do, but not only that, you care about the health and safety of your animals as well. Because I know from our experience, the first rabbits we actually had them in the chicken coop. We just let them live, and they burrowed a hole underneath the chicken coop, and they lived under there, and then ran around with the chickens. And we actually had to put those rabbits in a cage, not to keep them safe from the chickens. It was keeping the chickens safe from the rabbits. Because those rabbits would thump a chicken, all of a sudden we'd hear a bark, and then a rabbit goes flying across the pen area. Or not a rabbit, the chicken goes flying across the pen area, because the rabbit just thumped it, chook, and just kicked that thing across the coop. But then we also health-wise, they weren't doing good. They were getting respiratory issues with all the the chicken dander and all that stuff. And we're like, we need a better situation for these guys.
Yeah, if I have one lady that raises rabbits, and she's very active on Hostile Hair Facebook page, and she has chickens that go underneath of the rabbit cages and pick up little grubs and worms and flies and anything that's around there, and so they do cleanup, and her rabbits are all very healthy. I had another person that has rabbits in a system similar to what you described, where there are chickens and rabbits within a coop situation. Rabbits do not do very well mixed next to even quail like that. If there's anything roosting above them, they have a hard time with respiratory infections. Even some of the mites that aren't prevalent, like you can't see them on a bird, they become ear mites, they become fur mites on the rabbits, and you start seeing fur loss and things like that. So if you're going to raise them together, just be smart enough to keep you don't want the chickens to roost over top of your bunnies, because the rabbits aren't meant to be in in the dirt with chicken manure, for one, but
so
also
rabbits over chickens, not chickens over rabbits.
Exactly. Now, if you have a large yard that the entire thing is kind of rabbit-proof, so the rabbits can run freely, you can run chickens and rabbits together, as long as the population density is not really tight quarters. If it's really tight quarters and they're on top of each other all the time, they can interact. There's no problem with a rabbit and a chicken interacting, but it's when they're together constantly that you start seeing the cross infection of pathogens. You get a lot more infectious diseases like that. Also, when they're out and about like that in a non-controlled environment, you get things like bot flies, which are really gross. They'll actually lay an egg underneath the skin of the rabbit, and the larva turns into this little nickel-sized grub that lives in the rabbit, and it's nasty. And then if a chicken sees a sore like that on another animal, they pick at it. I don't know why. Chickens just do that. And so you can cause some serious issues almost overnight mixing chickens and rabbits together. So just keep those things in mind. It's nice to keep the rabbits in a system that you can inspect them and care for them more than just kind of set it and forget it and let them loose.
Well, this is one of those moments where we need to thank Nick Klein for being on the show today, so that we could all squirm and be really uncomfortable with the visuals that we've had throughout the conversation today.
Cue evil laughter.
I don't think it's cue evil laughter, right? So and people probably are still here because they're out. They're going to go from this to watching it, right? They're going to go watch the Stephen King movies and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, hey, so they can just feel more comfortable about life.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because people will ask me, why did I choose the name Hostile Hare when there's obviously rabbits are cute and fluffy. It's, well, the rabbits that I've dealt with, they scream, they kick, and they have opened my arms up with their claws. They're not always just cute and fluffy. They are attitude-packed little balls of fur. And so I've kind of demonized them with my character, and now I've got this 1920s style rabbit. It looks like a gangster more than a farm animal, and it makes it just a little bit easier when it comes to dispatch day.
Yeah, it's comical if you're into that kind of comedy. I mean, it's funny. I've always chuckled about your branding and stuff and what you do with that. It's a twist. It's like kind of throws the whole normalcy on its head. And in this world where the social media and stuff, it's like everybody looks like they're always having the best day ever. And people are always posting their best times of their life. Bunnies and rabbits have always been at the top of the list of things that people only shared pictures of the awesome side of rabbit world. That's just you never find a picture out there of the other side of rabbit world. You just don't. And so it's kind of interesting. But so they were the first real social media liars, I guess you could say. That we're only getting half the message is how rabbits are always portrayed. Always the cute fluffy guy, right?
Well, that's one of the T-shirts is a rabbit with a Tommy gun that says, "Never apologize for being on top of the food chain." Mm-hmm. I don't know if you believe in evolution or whatnot, but we've crawled to the top. We are through mind and body and all of that, and tools and up here we're stewards of the land. We have conscious decisions to make sure that everything in our care is taken care of, everything in our control is well treated. But it is our duty as top of the food chain to make sure all this stuff is taken care of. But we are still the top of the food chain.
Yeah, it's like once we can acknowledge that we make a difference to the animal, to the environment, or whatever it is, it's like if we're making a difference, we can acknowledge the fact that we're impacting it in any way. Then to become a steward is kind of the next best step. It's like to then do your best to improve it, to lessen your impact or whatever it ends up being for yourself. It's like, but to do your best with it, it seems to be almost a requirement of being human. Once you're aware, then you need to act and you need to do something about it. And just like you did, being aware that animals weren't treated as well as you'd like them to be, and then you took action. You said, well, I'm going to find a better way. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to really get in and get to know this. No other animal on planet Earth, as far as I'm aware, is that self-aware, aware of the impact they're making, and then being able to make a sentient decision to change that and to improve it. Or am I missing an animal? Maybe amoeba do that. We just don't know. Maybe they're really good at improving their world and being conscious of it. I don't know.
Everything else that exists in nature follows the population to population food diagram, and it looks kind of like a bell curve. You ramp up to food supply, and then with that much increased population, you have a mass die-off because that's when sickness hits, like at a deer herd or anything. Mm-hmm. So we're the only ones that have really been able to live past our well, I guess we haven't hit that yet, but as our population increases, we become more and more able to produce food.
We find a way, right?
Exactly.
So basically, we can't stop this population from growing. That's basically what you're saying, huh? We're always outsmarting our own limitations.
Yeah, well, you look at things like people living longer. We've got, love them or hate them, pharmaceutical companies have figured out to make us live longer. Food is, we're abundant. Obviously, in the U.S., we've got some problems with obesity. We've got so much food.
Yeah, we're so good at making food. We have, yeah, we've got obesity and heart disease and and a lot of things that are food related.
Yeah, and that's, we've got all these things, and as we grow as a population, our way of farming these giant fields with, it costs about 18 gallons of diesel fuel to harvest corn anymore, from planting it all the way up to planting, cultivating, spraying, all that. It's about 18 gallons an acre. You know, these giant sprawling agricultural systems are eventually going to be replaced with small urban farming because that's all we have space for left. And it might not be, even within the next 20 years, but we really need to start looking at the rooftops. We need to look at the backyards and stop growing grass and lawns and start growing food. If you can turn landscape into, an edible agriscape.
Yeah, thanks for the plug on that. That's great.
Well, I figured they'd already heard about it since they're listening to your podcast.
Well, absolutely. Well, and it's I mean, obviously it's a mainstay of what we talk about, and it's important. And having you on here today too is really important for everybody to recognize. It's like that I use manure as sources for growing my soil and recycling stuff, because as I eat my plants that are growing in my beautiful, elegant, edible landscape, I've got to replenish it somehow. And what I've found is one of my easiest ways to do it on site is actually my rabbits. My rabbits are my quickest way to replenish that nutrient base using the stuff that's waste within my garden. So even before I take it to the compost, see, my compost has a bunch of rabbit stuff in it because I'll mix it in with my compost, but I try to go all through the rabbits before I would ever even take it to my compost to ensure that I have a good nutrient base and I've recycled my nutrients well. Because all the microbial activity, all that stuff, the enzymes, there's so many cool things going on in the bioflora through the center of a rabbit that really benefits my soil. And I want that stuff. So even if I'm not eating the meat, which, we haven't been, it's like with the rabbits we got right now, they are soil builders, and we give them, we had the special needs service people here earlier today, and, we had a new gal, and she's like, it says, oh, here, I want you guys to cut out the rest of these brassica roots, all these cabbages and stuff. They've been in a nice microclimate. We've had some nice cabbages throughout the summer that nobody knows you can grow in the middle of the summer in Arizona. But you put it in a microclimate, it grows. I said, hey, we got to cut those out and then go feed them to the rabbits. And she goes, you have bunnies? And she's all excited. And man, she was going to town, just pulling stuff out, feeding the bunnies. And she's like, oh, well, what do you do with these? I was like, well, they build our soil. And she was just totally excited. Special needs people they have a lot of excitement. A lot of them can have a lot of excitement over the littlest things. And, they're not rabbits to her. They're all bunnies, even though they're, 15-pound rabbits, in the cages there. And she's so excited. But it's a fact that if I want to grow soil quickly, if I put it through a rabbit, that's my most efficient way to do it.
Oh, I agree. And this is kind of off topic of the gardening, but the second reason I got into rabbits was for alternative fuel purposes. And this is going to open a door for maybe another phone call, but I found that I can replace gasoline with 11 pounds of rabbit manure through a system called gasification. Basically, I was looking for a way to pelletize grass clippings into controlled density and size and shape. And what better than to feed them to rabbits?
There you go.
So these pellets that come from the rabbits, I can run into a gasifier and run a generator, a vehicle, anything that would use internal combustion, I can use rabbit manure to power it. You can also use things like wood chips, corn.
So you're talking kind of like a methane? Is it basically a methane that you're producing off of it, or what is the actual fuel?
So we'll back up. We'll back up a little bit here. When you strike a match, there are four things that are happening. There's dehydration. There is pyrolysis, combustion, and reduction. So pyrolysis is usually the word that hangs people up. That means thermal breakdown. So you are releasing the hydrocarbons that are inside that match. So if you notice when you strike a match, the flame usually is above the match a little bit. It's not on it right there at the wood. It's just above it. And what's happening is the heat from that flame is releasing more and more hydrocarbons from the matchstick, and they're burning off. And then what you're left with is a hot carbon skeleton of the match. And that's the reduction area. Now, reduction happens at about 800 to 1200 degrees, where hot carbon grabs a hold of passing oxygen molecules and doesn't care what it comes from. It takes an oxygen atom right off of water or right off of CO2. And so the products of combustion are water and CO2. And if you have an area where reduction is happening, you're producing hydrogen and carbon monoxide, both of which can be reburnt and form water and CO2. So gasification is basically separating the 4 steps of fire, which are dehydration, pyrolysis, combustion, and reduction. Did I lose you, or are we good?
Oh, keep going.
It's
This is, our Bill Nye the Science Guy moment with Nick Klein.
So anyway, the product that comes out of this, I use a stratified gasifier, which is basically a fancy word for it. Separates it into 4 areas. You picture a steel hourglass, and in the center of the pinch point of the hourglass, you have a small amount of oxygen coming in from the outside, and that's where your combustion happens. So you light stuff on fire in there, and the heat from that combustion causes thermal breakdown and dehydration of your feedstock or your fuel stock above the combustion. All of that water that's being boiled out and all that CO2 and water that's being produced in the combustion, plus all of the volatile hydrocarbons that are coming out of the fuel stock, are all rushing down out the only exit in the bottom past the reduction layer or the hot carbon layer, and you're basically producing mass amounts of dirty smoke. So if you light a candle and blow it out and then light the smoke on fire and watch the fire dance down the smoke back to the wick, it's a similar system to that. So you have heat that is still there and just a very small amount of flame. And so if you can't get enough oxygen to your combustion, you're not going to burn up all of those hydrocarbons and hydrogen and carbon monoxide. So you've got this hot 800-degree fog coming out of the gasifier and into an area where you basically try and filter out the different tars that get released from your different feedstocks.
So you're kind of distilling it at that point. You're kind of cooling it and distilling it through that process.
Well, yeah, you're filtering it and cooling it. And when you cool something, you're also compressing it. And now you've got a very rich, thick fuel fog that acts like propane. Now this gas, they call it syngas or synthetic gas or producer gas. And then it can, at this point, you have like a double butterfly valve system hooked up to the intake of an engine. And so you control the amount of air that goes into the engine and the amount of gaseous fuel that goes into the engine. Now, the best part of this story is I didn't know what gasification was about 10 years ago. I was in my backyard making gunpowder, and part of the process is you have to carbonize straw. Well, I had this straw that was inside of a steel can with a hole in the lid, and the idea is you put that in the fire, and as that steel can heats up, it causes pyrolysis of the matter inside. Nobody explained that to me. So I'm watching this little flame flicker out of a controlled opening in a steel can, and I'm looking at that thinking, that's fuel. So I'm like, how do I harvest that fuel? So I hook up a worm to it, or a copper tube to cool it down, and I filter, and I play with this for like 2 years. I'm playing with it. I didn't think to look on Google to see if anybody else had already done this. I get this thing together, and I start running a small engine off of it and present it to somebody at school. And I was like, look what I did. I found a new source of fuel. And I'm thinking I'm going to be a billionaire. Yeah. There was my college professor at NAU. He goes, oh, yeah, it looks like a rudimentary display of external heat source gasification. I was like, no, it doesn't have a name yet. Wait, what? So apparently back in the 1880s, they came up with a way to run internal combustion engines off of wood chips and even buffalo manure, or not buffalo manure, but cattle manure and goat manure. Anything that is made of hydrocarbons can be ran through a gasifier. Even trash bottles, grocery bags, all those things, they kind of cause a mess, but you can use them in there. But yeah, that's originally, I got the 5 first rabbits because of that and knowing that I could eat them. But my biofuels project turned into much, much more as I went from backyard scientist to backyard farmer.
Well, and that's another thing, and it's kind of more, it's reflective of, like you were saying earlier, that our society right now, consumes a lot, but has really no accountability or perspective on where all their stuff comes from. Food is one thing, but also fuel is another thing. It's like people don't really know or understand how they get their fuel, and then they'll complain about all these things, and yet they're driving their car all the time. And not even thinking twice as they're pumping gas into their engine. And then we have those that are like, well, I'm going to ride my bike all the time. Well, what about the rubber that made your tires? What about it's like there's so many pieces that it's so many people are so far away from the raw material that creates what they're wearing, what they're living in, their houses, the electricity, all these things. We become oblivious to the sourcing because of a lot of these things. So it's cool that you bring that up, and I think having more of this science, people being able to learn, that they become more aware and they become kinder. It's like the more knowledge we have, real knowledge based on the fundamental components of what makes up the computer I'm talking through, the speaker that I'm here, I'm listening through in my ear right now. All these components, I start asking and start going, well, where did this come from, and how did it get here? All these things I take for granted. Then we start becoming kinder to all people and nature and everything, because we really start understanding where everything's from, and that we're all connected. Exactly. It's all interconnected.
I like that feeling of it, where you're not don't focus so hard on being against something.
Yes.
If you've got some complaints to make, okay. Instead of voicing your concerns and your complaints, come up with a solution. If you have a solution ready, you can say, hey, folks, we have this problem. We have food being abused before it gets to us. But you know what? I have this solution. It's called urban farming. I think we can get a few people on board doing this. Then the big companies will see that they need to win our love again by taking care of their animals. We don't need to dress up in a cellophane bag and hang out in front of a grocery store saying meat is murder. We need to come up with a solution, not just a complaint.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like there's a quote that I always love from Mother Teresa during the Vietnam War, which was an ugly war. No matter how you look at it, it was ugly. The conversations about it were ugly. Everything around it was ugly. Resistance to be in it, resistance to be out of it. It was ugly. And inside that whole conversation was this conversation that someone came up to Mother Teresa and said, Mother Teresa, will you march with us against the war? And she says, no, I will not march with you against the war. If there is a march for peace, I will join you, but I'm not against anything. And nice. It's like, wow, that's good. And from that, I started realizing that most of what we argue about is because we're focusing too much on what separates us and what we're against.
Yes.
Rather than focusing on the things that we might be for. Because as we have the conversation of what we're for, we start finding commonality. And not only commonality, we find action. We start taking action when we focus on what we're for. Why aren't there rallies and marches about what we're for? Why aren't people out there doing things and just like, let's get a group of people together and actually change a park rather than go to City Hall and complain about it? Why don't we just clean it up?
Yeah.
Why don't we just do something? And what we're for the cleaning up, not against the people that aren't cleaning it up. We're just for it being cleaned up. Let's put the action and energy and heart into the change in service to others. Be that kind of advocate. And that's, I guess, what we love to do with Agriscaping. That's what we're doing. It's like I'm not against my HOA when they tell me that I can't grow a certain plant in my yard. I'm not against them. I say, well, what are you trying to achieve? What are you for? What do you want to see in my yard? Well, I want to make sure it looks good. It's easy to maintain. They have all their lists of things. And I say, okay. I can do that and grow food. Would that be okay? And all of a sudden we have a totally different conversation. And,
yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing.
Open that dialogue.
Once
you open that dialogue, it is it's much better than just hate somebody at a distance silently. If you're talking with them, you can really, you make a friend out of the matter. You might still at the end of it be in disagreement, but at least both sides of it feel the mutual respect that, hey, I value your opinion and this is what I'm trying to do. How can we improve our relationship? My HOA wants my house to maintain its value, and I want it to maintain its value as well, but I also know that having food-producing plants on my property are going to make my house a higher valued house.
Yeah.
We both have this.
Sorry, I was just saying, it's like I really respect HOAs. Some people are against HOAs, but again, it's just the attitude of dissonance and separation. But if I look at what an HOA can do, it can do some good. I'm trying to help my father-in-law and mother-in-law sell their home right now. They built a beautiful little custom home on a 1/4 acre lot with irrigation, nice quiet neighborhood with no HOA. The biggest deterrent, unfortunately, for people to buy the house, from our experience in trying to sell it the last few months, is the neighbors and the other houses, and that it's on a dirt road and there's no improvement. It's like, well, darn it, people can't see the real beauty of this house because of how everything else around it is situated and oriented. The againstness they almost seem to have for some of the people to even have a clean house or to have a clean yard or to, it's those kind of things. It affects other people. And some of the neighbors on that street, have started to work together to beautify the space, and that's what they're for. They're not against the ones that have it ugly, they're for it. And so we always make sure that we try to direct traffic to come see the house by those people's houses. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not against the people and what they're doing. I am for the people that are doing the things that help benefit where I'm trying to go with my life and the life of my family, So I'm just directing people to go that channel and to go that route.
I don't know, man. That sounds like you're going to have to send me a link to that real estate listing, because it sounds like my kind of street.
Yeah, it's a great property. We'll have to show you it later. But maybe it'll be sold by the time everybody is actually hears this one. I don't know.
Then we're talking about the new headquarters of Hostile Hair. Yeah. We'll call it the Hostile Homestead.
Right, and it's but see, it's finding the right fit. What's the right fit for people and stuff too? Because obviously, if I brought as much rabbit world in as you have into my HOA, it'd be tough for me to get that passed off. I'd have to build an external structure that has the exact same roof tiles as my house has and has stucco in it. The amount of stuff I'd have to do in order to still have them be for me and me be for them. That we're for each other in that sense. And that we're serving each other, it would take more effort than I'm willing to do. Simple as that. And I can acknowledge that and say, well, that's where it is, and I'm still choosing to live here. But, man, we've been having too much fun on this conversation. I just noticed how much time we've been taking, and we've gone beyond the time, as well as we've gone in so many different directions that I never anticipated going with you.
Well, that's the problem with having a conversation.
Well, Nick, is there any closing thoughts that you'd like to give? Maybe a rebuttal to all the thinking that people are having against you? I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go there. We're not going to even worry about that.
Listen, I'm a mass murderer of the cute and fluffy, and I'm self-titled president of the Mott Calf Club. I get it. People don't like what I do. That doesn't make what I do wrong. And I guess if you're looking to control what you eat from seed to meat, then give me a call, hostilehair.com. That's what we do.
from seed to meat, huh?
Yep. Control what you eat from seed to meat.
Control what you eat from seed to meat. That's cute. Well, and that's the other cool thing too. Like you said, it's you don't have to be for what someone does in order to like them or respect them. I don't have to agree with people in order to respect them. And for each person I want to respect me for my choices is me respecting others for their choices. And that's how I get more respect. It's not by trying to demand it. It's by simply giving it. You get what you give. And if you're giving respect, you're for something, you get people that will be for you and respecting you. You don't have to agree with them. It may not be right for you, but respect that they might find something contrary to your belief that's right for them. I mean, that's life. Welcome to humanity. It's nice to have you with us, right?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, and again, hostilehair.com. You can also find them on Facebook. Join the conversation if you like. And do yourself a favor, as well as all humanity. And if you engage in these conversations online with regard to animals and pets and things like that, you'll find more friends when you focus on what you're for. And you'll also find a nicer life, a happier life, and more change for the better will happen because of what you're for than what you're against. So we'll leave it with that little message. Have a great day, everybody, and enjoy finding out what you're really for and how you can serve. Make a difference today. See you later.